Welcome everyone to the final Local and Family History Series lecture for spring 2026. Thank you all for coming. Today's topic is using the BPL special collections to research your family history. We do have a guest with Claire Drone Silvers. We will hear more from her later. So first off, we have some things to take care of. We acknowledge that the Boston Public Library's Central Library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning. Deliberations and public engagement will take place from the spirit of welcome and respect, found in our motto, free to all. So this program, as you may have noticed at the beginning, is going to be recorded. I will be sending a link to the recording once it's up on our YouTube channel to everyone who is registered. Everyone will also be getting a follow-up email tomorrow that will have a link to the handout in case you didn't get it. I'm also going to put that in the chat right now. And you also have a link to the slides here and a link to the chat transcript. So you don't have to worry if you missed something, you'll be able to see it. As I mentioned before, the chat box is open. We do have some ground rules though. If you want to say hi and tell us where you're joining us from, please feel free, but not obligated to. All chat messages during the presentation and the Q&A period should be related to the topic of the presentation. And this includes all questions, comments, and any resources you may want to share. We do welcome any corrections or anything. And if we get something wrong, please do let us know. But again, please be respectful. We ask that you be respectful of myself, our guest, and all the other attendees. We will do our best to make sure we get to all of your questions during the Q&A period. However, if we don't get to your question before the program ends, you'll be able to contact us at ask@bpl.org afterwards. We got Bill from Somerset, Acton, and Lowell. Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you all here. So, come on. There we go. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Jessie Wheeler. I'm the genealogy specialist here at the Boston Public Library, and I work in the Research Services Department. I mostly handle teaching online genealogy classes and programming along with other regular duties. And I will be starting off this presentation just going over some genealogy research basics so you can get an idea of what kinds of things you might want to look for. And then after that, Claire will from Special Collections will be here to talk about material that can be used for genealogy research and special collections and some other information about what the department is and how to contact them. So first, we're going to cover some genealogy research basics. First off, what is genealogy? Genealogy is the study of families that mainly tracing the ancestors of a person and finding basic information about them. This is generally going to be birth, death, and marriage information, the dates and the locations, really basic information. So if you're just drawing a diagram or filling out a chart, a lot of that is genealogy. Family history is the study of families that includes not only tracing the ancestors of a person, but also trying to find out as much as we can about them. So that includes the basic information that we mentioned with genealogy, but also filling it out with where did they work, how many people were in their family, where did they go to school, what kinds of things, what was life like while where they lived, who did they live around, and various other things. There's a lot you can find on that. These terms are frequently used interchangeably, and some folks consider them synonyms. I will be using the term genealogy for the rest of this presentation, just for simplicity's sake. Okay, so if you're just getting started with genealogy, this is basic advice that I give to everyone who I interact with that's just getting started with this. The main thing is to have a clear goal in mind. So, ask yourself some questions. How far back do you want to go? Are you looking to go back just a few generations, or do you want to go back as far as you possibly can? Is there a specific person or family group you want to focus on? So, did you have just a grandparent or great grandparent that you were looking into? Is there a single branch of your family tree that you want to look into, or just a specific nuclear family that you want to look into? Also, how much information do you want to find for each person you research? Did you just want basic information? So, birth, death, and marriage, dates and locations, really basic stuff that you would write down in a chart? Or do you want to find out as much information as you possibly can? So, like I said before, where did they go to school? What was their job? Where did they live? What kind of neighborhood was it? All that kind of thing. So, that's something that you should definitely figure out before you get started, just so you know how much research you have to do. Also, if your goal is to do an entire family tree, I highly recommend starting with yourself and working backwards. So that would include start by writing down what you know. So just be writing your own information, whatever you know about your parents, grandparents, as far back as you can go with what you yourself know. That'll give you something to work on, to start with, rather than just by starting fresh, you can start with something. And then if you are, especially, this is especially true if you wanted to just get as much as you possibly can, record as many names, dates, and places as possible. So, and always start with the basic information. You might want to focus on where did they go to school, jobs, other things like that. But in order to find that, it's good to know when and where they were born and when and where that they died. So you have a framework to go on. So you can always estimate what kind of school they might have been in by their age. For instance, if you know they were 10 years old and a certain year, you know you're looking for a grammar school or an elementary school or whatever it was called where they were at. So you know basically what you need to look for. Another thing that's very important is to use as many sources as you possibly can, particularly if you're doing a lot of extensive research. So this could include basic things like vital records, that's birth, death, and marriage records. Census records are another great basic resource to start off with because you can get a lot of names and dates and locations from them. Newspapers are also really helpful, most particularly for obituaries. Those contain a lot of information, but they can also have things like wedding announcements, information about what your ancestor was doing, and lots of other things. I actually taught an entire class on using newspapers, which you can see on our YouTube channel. Also, things like directories. So, this includes things like phone books, city directories, lists of residents, and also if you're researching someone of certain social classes, social directories. So, things like the social register or more locally Clark's Blue Book. So, those would have, more well-off people, but if that's who you're researching, that would be a good resource to try. Can give you some information about their social lives, like what clubs they belong to, where they went to college, things like that. So those are more basic things, but other resources that you can look into that are quite, not quite as common and some folks don't think of. Family Bibles. If you have one in your family, that's a gold mine. A lot of family Bibles had sections that where folks could fill out and then names, dates, and births and death information for relatives. My mother has her mother's Bible, and there's a lot of information in there about her siblings and her cousins, which is really useful. Photo albums can also be a good resource, particularly if you're fortunate enough to have a relative who put names and dates on all the pictures. They can be a really good source of information outside of just having a picture. They can have some written information. And if you're extremely lucky, you'll be able to find diaries and things like diaries and letters and written information from your relatives. Sometimes that might be the only way to find certain information if there's no official record. So the process of doing research can vary depending on what you're doing, what kind of research you're doing. Your method might be a little different, but this is a basic process that I generally recommend. First off, know what basic information you want. So know what you want for each person. So you know how much you have to do, what places you might have to go. So for example, the basic things, like I've said, are related to birth, death, and marriage and children. So know what you want to find. Other thing is don't rely on one source for a piece of information. You always want to make sure it can be backed up in another thing. This is because uh, these records were created by humans and humans make mistakes. So one thing I like to, my favorite example that I like to give in the 1940 census, I was looking for Leonard Nimoy because he's from Boston and I'm a Star Trek fan. So I wanted to see if I could find him and I was having a lot of trouble, but he wasn't there. Could not find him. So I figured out what were his parents and his brother's names. So I found him that way. And the reason I wasn't able to find him is because his name was spelled wrong and he was listed as a girl. Not quite sure why. So that's just my favorite example. People make mistakes in these records. However, conversely, if just one thing is wrong, but everything else is right, for instance, if you know that if the age is right, the other people living with them are right, and things like census records, but the name is slightly off, it's still probably the right person. The other example I like to give for that, I have a great aunt who I only ever knew as Claire. And I found the family on the 1940 census, but I just saw a Mary. Wasn't sure who that was, but the age was about right for Aunt Claire. So I asked my mother, was Claire's first name actually Mary? And yes, indeed it was. So there you go. So I figured it was probably her, because everything else matched up, but I did get confirmation from my mother on that. And like I said, talking to relatives can be great. However, some family stories may just be stories, particularly if they've been passed down over several generations. I've had to unfortunately disappoint a lot of people, tell them their stories. There were no records to back up their stories. I've had folks who say, "Oh, what my relative was in this battle." Like, well, no, they probably weren't. They were way too young. They were only 10, so that didn't happen. So that's just something to keep in mind. There may be some basis in fact in these stories, but sometimes they may have just been so exaggerated over time that the version you have isn't true anymore. And the other thing, just as particularly as you're starting off, you will need some information to find information. So you need at the very least, you'll need someone's name. If you don't know a person's name, it's going to be hard to find anything on them. So you need to know something about the person that you're looking into before you start looking for information on them. So as I said, yeah. So related along those lines, use information you know to find more information. So like I said, with my Aunt Claire, like I knew about when she was born and where she was in the birth order and all that was right in there. So I figure, okay, that's probably Claire. Oh, and like I said, if one or two details are a little off, but everything else lines up, it's probably the right person. So you don't necessarily need to discount it if something is off. For instance, I was researching someone for a reference question I was working on, and the name of the person was the same, and the relatives he was with, people he was with, were the same all throughout what I was looking for, but he got a little younger. Every record I found for him, every census record, he was a little bit younger. I don't know that is the same person because everything else matches up. It's just his birth date keeps getting different every year. Not quite sure how that happened, but there we go. I managed to find other things for him. Also, and this is particularly true if you're contacting us, don't be afraid to ask for help. We are librarians. We like helping people. We get all sorts of questions. Do not be afraid to ask them. And also and this is probably the most important thing about doing this kind of research, be patient. It can be very time consuming. We've had folks come in who will spend literally all day looking at newspaper articles, obituaries, and using our databases. There's a lot of information out there now that's much more accessible than it was, 30, 40 years ago when people were doing this, but it takes a lot of time. So just keep that in mind. And this is something that is, increasingly important, particularly when you're dealing with older adults. Talk to living relatives that may have information. So if you're able to talk to parents, aunts and uncles, cousins, siblings, or in-laws, relatives by marriage, or anyone who might have known the person you're researching, talk to them, see what they know. So you start with yourself and then talk to other people. So I've talked to my older relatives about this. I have another great aunt who has info who's told me stuff. So talk to people that might know something. And particularly with older adults, do it while you can. Also, along with relatives, there's something that in genealogy we call the FAN club, FAN, which stands for friends, associates, and neighbors. So if folks like this are still around who might know something, talk to them. So this could be and their friend, their coworker, it could be a family friend, it could be just a neighbor, it could be someone they worked with, it could be a lot of, different types of people. So keep that in mind. Okay, this is another important part of it is documentation. So keep your information organized, but whatever you're comfortable with. I often have folks ask me, what should I do? How should I organize all this? And the answer is whatever works best for you. This could be that really fancy genealogy software that's out there, could be an online family tree, could be a spreadsheet, it could be pieces of paper in a 3-ring binder, could be a notebook, a filing cabinet with folders. That's what I have. Numerous other things. So it's whatever works best for you, whatever you feel comfortable using. Along with that, though, I will say, whatever format you use, want to make and regularly update backups of everything. So for physical records, make photocopies, keep them in a separate location from the originals. And for electronic records, make backup copies and keep them on a different external storage device. So a thumb drive, cloud service, cloud storage, something like that, because you never know what might happen and you want to be able to save your information. And this is perhaps one of the most important things that I try to stress to people, keep notes on all of your sources. So if you're looking at a book, this would include noting the title, the author, the year it was published, if you have it, if you can get it, the page number, and where you used it. We've had lots of people come in who say they were here 20 years ago and they found this book that had information about their ancestor and they want to look at it again, but all they know is that the cover was red and that it was in a certain room that doesn't exist anymore. Needless to say, with that little information, we can't really find it for you again. So always keep notes on all of your sources. So if it's something from a database, write down what database it was, what collection it was in there, and where you accessed it. Just write all that down. We've also had folks who think that they found something here, but it was actually a resource that was at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So where you found it. And for information that you have that's based on interviews, it's helpful if you write down the date and the location of the conversation, because that can help you jog your memory. Especially, and really mostly though, take really good notes. If you're able to record it, that's another thing. Make sure you label the recording really well so you know right away when it took place and the location and everything and the name of the person you talked to. But really keep notes on all of your sources. It'll be helpful for you and also be helpful for anyone who helped you find it. All right, so that is it for my portion. So up next, we have Claire Drone Silvers. She is the rare books and manuscript specialist in the Special Collections Department here at the Boston Public Library. Her day-to-day work involves preparing materials for reading room appointments and working with patrons both in person and virtually through reference inquiries, research visits, and programs. Right, and take it away, Claire.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Can you hear me okay?
Your volume's a little low.
Oh.
Oh, now we can't hear you at all.
No.
No.
No. Okay, I'm gonna take this off.
Yeah, just try using the computer microphone.
Hear me now?
No.
No.
Oh dear.
Oh no, technical difficulties.
Okay, I'm actually going to pause the recording for a second. All right, so the recording's paused.
Now can you hear me?
Yes,
Ah,
excellent.
excellent.
Okay,
Sorry,
there we go.
everyone. Too
All right.
many.
Okay, recording is resumed. Wait, hold on. Nope. Okay, there we go.
Right.
Okay. All right,
All
there we
right.
go.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Having some technical difficulties, but thanks so much for joining us for this webinar today. I hope I can provide some information about how to use BPL special collections to hopefully research your family history. Jesse gave a fantastic introduction. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what I do. Jesse, would you mind flipping to the next slide? Ah, perfect. So my name is Claire. I'm the Rare Books and Manuscript Specialist in the Special Collections Department at BPL. So as Jesse said, a lot of my day-to-day work involves answering reference questions, preparing materials for the reading room, and working with programming as well. So I'm really excited to be here. If you've come to BPL before and have used special collections or wanted to use special collections, you might have noticed that our hours are a little bit different than the rest of the library. So we have a reading room where people are welcome to use materials from our collections. That reading room is for right now open Wednesdays through Fridays from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and we're available by appointment. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the webinar. But typically, this just means that if you want to use materials from our collections, we ask that you make an appointment and give us some advance notice so we can prepare materials for your visit. Um, we'll go ahead and get started from there. Jesse, could I get the next slide if that's all right? All right. So the first thing I tell people, anyone who comes to a special collections program is that everyone is welcome to use our collections. You do not need to be a Massachusetts resident. You do not need to be a scholarly researcher from an academic institution. You do not need to have a specific research project in mind. Everyone is welcome to use our collections. We are here for the public. And so please email us. Please come and use our materials. If you're curious about what we have kind of a little bit of everything. We have books, we have handwritten documents, we have works of art. So we have paintings and sculptures and prints. We have musical scores and scrapbooks. We have photographs. We have what we call archival collections, which may be the papers of a particular person or organization, and even more beyond that. Um, Special collections is divided into a few different departments, but we all work together simultaneously and we serve materials in the same reading room. So I'm part of the Rare Books and Manuscripts department. We also have the Archives department, the Arts department, and the Preservation and Conservation department as well. And we work really closely with Jesse's team, Research Services, as well as with Community History and other departments in the library. Um, there are just a couple things to know about using our materials. There are multiple points of access. So people constantly ask us, how do I find what you have? And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you might have to look in a few different places to see what we have, which is why we always encourage people to send us an email if you have questions. So, um, you can use our online catalog to look for materials. We also have a number of card catalogs and things that are called finding aids or inventories to be able to track down materials. So if you're looking in our online catalog and can't find something, it's always worth sending us an email just to see if there might be something available in a resource that you haven't checked yet, or to see if we have an inventory that we know about that we can provide for you. Um, if you want to see materials from special collections, we ask that you schedule a reading room appointment, and you can also check out our digitized collections if you can't make it in to see us in the reading room. So I'll plug us again. Please send us an email for more information. Um, we are available in person to chat, but typically every in-person reference interaction I have always ends up with me following up with an email. So please don't be afraid to send us an email. We're friendly. We don't bite, I promise. So going to continue on with the presentation and kind of discuss some materials from special collections that might be useful for your genealogy research. So some of these may be common knowledge to you, but I thought I would just point out a few kind of other ways that you might not have thought of using these collections before. So one type of material from special collections that could be useful for you is consulting letters or diaries or other handwritten documents. So the item on the bottom left that you see here is from our anti-slavery collection. Some of those items have been digitized and are available to peruse online. So handwritten documents like this can be incredibly helpful if you're looking for family history materials. You might also want to consult local government and church records. So in the middle of the screen here, you can see we have some materials that are from our Boston Town Records collection. This contains a variety of materials related to early Boston history, including some of the towns that were later annexed to become part of Boston, like Brighton and Roxbury. You can also consult printed histories of towns or organizations. This can include things like, almanacs or annual reports or things like that. Those can be great resources and great ways to find information about your family history. And then you can also consult newspapers. And I'm putting a little asterisk here because there are several departments at BPL that have newspapers. So what I always tell folks to do is consult the newspapers in Research Services first. Research Services has a much more comprehensive collection of newspapers than we do in special collections. And in addition, the newspapers in special collections are often incredibly fragile. So I usually tell people go to research services first, use the newspapers on microfilm there, and if you can't find a specific issue or if the image quality isn't great, send us an email and see if we have um, uh, an original newspaper and maybe we could scan it for you. So always worth checking in multiple places. Um, Continuing on. Oh, thanks, Jesse. That's awesome. I'll also note that we have a number of organizational records and collections in our holdings. This can include things like theater companies, which are really rich sources. If you know that an ancestor was involved in a theater in Boston, we have a number of theater collections in our holdings. We also have a lot of volumes of meeting minutes and organizational records. And these are really helpful because they often include the names of people who attended those meetings. They include information about what they were doing in those meetings, some of their known associates. And so if you know that your ancestor was involved in a specific organization, whether it's a church or some sort of society, it's always worth seeing if we have meeting minutes from that organization, just to see if we might have some information about the person you're looking into. We also have a great collection of photographs related to Boston history in our arts department. We get a lot of questions about our photographic collections. I'm not an expert on these, but our curator of photography is a wizard at finding information. Something I will tell you is that it's always better to go in with kind of a wider angle. So trying to find a photo of a specific person is often difficult because our photographs sometimes don't have descriptive information that includes names, but we might have a photograph of a certain place or a certain group. And so if you can, figure out different ways to try to find to find photographs of someone that you're interested in researching or a specific place, that can be a good route to find a photograph that might be relevant for you. And the last thing that I wanted to plug is our community cookbooks. We have a great collection of community cookbooks in the Special Collections Department. And this can actually be a really great resource for finding just little tidbits about your ancestors as well. So if you know that you have an ancestor who is involved in a particular organization, let's say a church or a school, you might want to see if we have a community cookbook that is from that organization. So, for example, at the bottom here, I have one of the items from our community cookbook collection. And if you can see here, we have a recipe for watermelon cake, which sounds delicious to me. Sounds nice and refreshing for this time of year. And we get the person's name who contributed the recipe, and Mrs. Lyman Bowers. So we have to figure out from there what Mrs. Lyman Bauer's first name is, but we do get some information. We can see like a family recipe that this person has contributed to a cookbook. So community cookbooks can also be a really great resource for finding information about your ancestors. Um, Continuing on, um, something I always want to emphasize is that this sort of research is really interesting and really fascinating. Um, but it's important to think creatively when you're using our collections. So I'm just going to talk about some considerations for when you're doing research in special collections. And I think some of these carry through to what Jesse was saying earlier. One thing to keep in mind as you're researching with historic materials is that handwriting and spelling may be a little different than what we're used to today. Spelling and orthography wasn't standardized for a long time. And so you might see different spellings of names. So someone whose last name today we would spell as Smith, Smith, might be spelled Smyth or Smythe in older documents. And sometimes people spelled their names different ways in the same document. So if you're researching someone and you can't quite find the last name or first name that you're looking for, just try using a different spelling and see if that gets you somewhere. Sometimes things are misspelled or just spelled differently, and that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're looking into documents from, the 17th century and earlier. There are also different letter forms that you might see. You might see something called a long S, which looks very, very similar to an F. So if you've ever seen an old map of Boston, where it looks like it's labeled Bofton, that's you have a long S in the middle of the word. And so sometimes the letter forms can look a little bit different in documents before, the 18th century and earlier. Um, and that's something to keep in mind too as you're using digitized resources. Sometimes printed books also used different letter forms like that long S. And so, for example, if you're looking at materials in Internet Archive, sometimes a long S will appear in a book. And if you try to type in like Boston in the keyword search, Internet Archive won't read, like the OCR won't read that long S as an S, and so it won't pick up the result. So I always encourage people to try segments of words as if they're, searching in books online, and just to keep in mind that you might have to play around with spelling as you're looking at handwritten documents and printed documents as well. Um, and now also the handwriting can be different. If you look at the handwriting that I put on here, this is some lovely material from our Boston Town records. And some people may have no problem reading this document. This handwriting actually isn't too bad. But handwriting can be really challenging to read, especially if you're dealing with early modern material. And so there are lots of resources online that are able to provide some guides for reading cursive, reading early modern handwriting. And so I encourage you to check those out. You can also email us. We have experience using those resources as well, and we're always happy to provide more information about useful external resources to consult. Something else I always like to tell patrons is remember that there are many, many silences and gaps within our collections. Part of this is logistically speaking, we can't collect everything. And so you might email us and wonder if we have town records from a town, out in Western Mass. And unfortunately, we don't typically have those. They might be at another organization. But also, our collections may not everyone knew how to read or write, and so they may not have left written records. A lot of the materials that we have focus on male voices. There's also a lot of white voices featured. And also, socioeconomic status can vary as well. And so there are what we call archival silences in our collections. And that's something to keep in mind as you're researching your ancestors, is that there are gaps in our materials. And so We don't always have something that mentions every single person. That doesn't mean you still can't find information about your family, though. I do also think it's important to set expectations when you're looking for documents about your ancestors that maybe you do find a diary from your ancestor, which is incredible, but sometimes their diary keeping practices were a little bit different, and maybe their diary doesn't include their thoughts from everyday life. Maybe it includes biblical quotes. Maybe it includes comments about the weather. It might not be quite what you're looking for, but that's still really crucial information and still really interesting to have. And the last thing I'll focus on in this slide is something that Jessie said in her portion of the presentation, which is to evaluate your sources. So can you find multiple records with similar information so you can kind of corroborate the information that you're seeing? Can you use a primary source to confirm the information that you found in a secondary source? And sometimes vice versa. Um, Something I'll also echo Jesse about is please, 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 if you find something crucial for your research, please give us a good citation. Um, uh, we also get a lot of reference questions where people say like, "Oh, I saw a letter a long time ago, and it was in your collections." And sometimes it's in our collections, but sometimes it's over at the Massachusetts Historical Society. We have a lot of similar institutions here in Boston, and so when you can. Keep track of your citations, make sure you're evaluating your sources and keeping things straight. It'll help you, it'll help family members years on out, and it will help the librarians who are hopefully going to help them as well if you can keep track of your sources and cite them well. Continuing on, something Jesse also mentioned is that doing this kind of research takes a lot of time and effort. This slide I'll summarize and say like don't be discouraged if it takes a long time to find some of this information. Sometimes you really have to dig, and sometimes you might have to, take a break. We often encourage researchers to take a break in the reading room because it can be really frustrating to dig through boxes and boxes of material and not quite find what you're looking for. So I like to set researchers up for success and remind them that you might not find the exact thing you're hoping to find. That doesn't mean that your research was not worthwhile and that there isn't still information you can glean from those records. It may also take time to pinpoint which exact materials you need to see, and that's something we're here to help you with. So always feel free to reach out to us for more questions. One thing that I also wanted to suggest when working with materials from special collections in particular is that it's really helpful sometimes to zoom out and contextualize. A lot of times in genealogical research, we focus on those nitty-gritty details. And sometimes you look through records and you realize that you can't quite find anything about the specific person that you're looking for. And in that case, sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and think, well, what information can I figure out about this person's life? Maybe I have a general knowledge of where they lived and their basic dates. Is there a town history that I could consult? And maybe I can't find a record written by that specific person or about that specific person, but can I contextualize what their life might have looked like? Maybe you read a town history and you find out that there was a flood in that area or an epidemic of illness. And maybe that contextualizes information about your family and helps give you an idea of kind of what they were living through, even if you can't find a specific record about that person. We have a researcher in our reading room right now who is working diligently through a lot of materials. And something they've reminded me of a lot is that sometimes, chasing down a one particular name is really elusive. And so for them, taking a step back and trying to figure out, okay, I can't find information about this specific person, but can I find information about, the next step out? Maybe they were living in an almshouse at some point. Can I find out information about that almshouse during that time period? Are there records that are more general like that? And so sometimes, the detailed work is important, and so is zooming out. And the last thing I'll suggest is it's so important to refer to multiple resources and institutions. I worry sometimes that patrons think that we're foisting them off on someone else when we pass them to a different department or a different institution. And I want to reassure you that that's not what we're trying to do. Sometimes we don't have a record about your ancestor. And so what we try to do is we try to say, maybe we don't have it, but someone else does. Or maybe we have part of the puzzle and another institution has a different piece. So please don't be discouraged if you reach out to us and we don't have what you're looking for. We will try in our email and in our exchange to suggest some alternate options for you. Rarely do I answer a reference question and say, sorry, no can do, and just leave it at that. We librarians like a good mystery. We like to be detectives. And so if we don't have something that's relevant for you, we'll try to suggest some resources that might be useful for you to use as well. So make use of all the area institutions that you have. We also, one of the reasons why we encourage people to email us is because we work really closely with people in Jesse's department in research services. There are times when someone will email and I answer a piece of it and then I pass it on to Jesse's team and they're able to find more information. And so we really pass information back and forth. And so it's really neat to try to piece together pieces of that puzzle. And that can't happen unless we all kind of jump in and fit our own section of that. So don't be discouraged if you have to, if number one, the research takes a long time, and if you have to visit or email a bunch of different institutions, that's all part of the process. All right, so I've given you a lot of information and a lot of considerations, which maybe you already knew. And so you might be wondering how to get started with some of your special collections research. So, like Jesse said, it's really good to start with the information that you already have. Do you know the name of a person you're researching? Do you know their general dates and where they might have lived? It's also good to know what information you're hoping to find. Are you hoping to verify their dates of birth, their date of birth, or a marriage date? Are you hoping to find out maybe like what they did for a living? Kind of knowing what you're looking for is going to help us figure out what sorts of documents to recommend to you. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And then, like Jesse said, if you have family documents, take a closer look. Family Bibles in particular can be really useful, family photographs. Your family may also have a genealogy, and that's incredibly useful. Again, it's always good to corroborate if you can find other sources that will back up that family history. But it's that's a really great resource as well. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So maybe you want to use special collections. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different ways to search for materials in our collections. So I'm just going to talk about a few options. And again, I'll say it again, feel free to email us and we're always happy to help. So you may be most familiar with our online catalog. There are a couple of different interfaces of this, and I'll go into more details on the second option in just a second. So BiblioCommons is kind of our general online catalog. This is what you see if you type in bpl.org in your browser. And this is a great way to search our collections. The classic catalog interface is the same. You'll get the same search results, the same materials. I like it a little bit more because I can customize the advanced search a little bit more definitively, and it works really well for the materials that I use on a day-to-day basis in special collections. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second and kind of show you how I might use that to help narrow down materials. I'll also let you know that not everything is in our online catalog. We're working on it, but it's a slow process, and we're constantly adding more materials. And trying to make our records better. So I also recommend consulting digitized card catalogs. And I'm sharing links in this and in the handout to the digitized card catalogs for rare books. We also have digitized card catalogs for other subjects as well, and other departments. So again, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to send you links to those. If you're looking for archival collections, so let's say you're looking for the papers of an organization. You can also find these in archive space, which is where we keep track of finding aids for collections. And then our arts department also has its own website, arts.bpl.org. And this is where you can look for specific works of art or specific painters or artists if you know that one of your relatives was an artist. We also digitize some of our materials. We can't digitize everything. It's a very labor intensive and expensive process, but we try to digitize as much as we can. And we put this on Digital Commonwealth. So I've included a link to that. That's always a great place to search and just see if you can find digitized letters or postcards or photos or anything like that. So I encourage you to browse Digital Commonwealth and just see what you can find. And lastly, don't forget to email us. I know I've said it before and I'll say it again before the webinar is over. We're always happy to get your emails, and it might take us a little while to respond. Sometimes it involves a lot of, oh, email sent. That makes me so happy. It might take us a little while to respond. We have a lot of emails that come in, and sometimes it takes us a while to do the research as well. But please email us, and we will get back to you. All right, so to kind of hone in on some of the tools I just mentioned, this is our classic catalog, and this is what I use the most often when I look for materials in special collections. So I really like this. I use the advanced search option, which you can find if you look at look at this page in under the search menu, it'll give you the option to select the advanced search. And what I really like about this is I can add different search terms to be able to kind of narrow my search from the get-go. So, for example, if I wanted to look and see what letters or correspondence or handwritten documents we have written by Abigail Adams, which we do have a few, what I can do is I can select author as a search term and put Abigail Adams in. And then, because I only want handwritten documents, I can select the genre search and add manuscripts in there. And that's going to drastically narrow the search results for me. If I just do Abigail Adams as the author, I might find a printed work by her. I might find even though I put her as the author, I might find documents about her depending on how things are coded. But by narrowing it to the genre manuscripts, that's going to narrow my search down to handwritten documents, which if you're looking for letters or diaries or, I don't know, other sorts of handwritten documents, this is a great way to immediately narrow your search. Once you're in the search results, you can use the menu on the side to further narrow your search results. But this is a great way to just initially like boil down to handwritten documents. So I really recommend using the classic catalog search and adding search terms here as you go. I use that all the time. The next search discovery tool that I would recommend is our card catalog. If you visit us in the Special Collections Reading Room, you will see one of our card catalogs in the reading room. I still use this on a daily basis. Luckily, part of a pandemic era project, our card catalogs in the reading room have been fully digitized and they are searchable in Internet Archive. We're always happy to send you the links to these. You can find them on our website. Um, Many of the records have been added to our online catalog, but as I mentioned a few minutes ago, not everything is in there yet. And there is a lot of really good information in this card catalog. So I have a couple of examples below. The top one is a printed book, um, The Souls of Black so this is from our printed card catalog. And the thing I want to note here is maybe you're doing family research and you're like, well, my ancestor wasn't famous. They didn't write a book. I don't think I need to search for them in this card catalog. It's always worth a go because our card catalog also includes things like gift inscriptions. Sometimes it'll include if there's a name in a book plate. And so here on this card, we see gift inscription from Mr. Dillingham to Mr. Lemon. Now, those names don't mean much to me, but if you're a member of the Dillingham family, maybe this is important to you. And so I always encourage people to, again, just take a look and see. Maybe you'll find an inscription or a book plate or a mark of ownership that's mentioned in these cards that you might not think of otherwise, even if your ancestor wasn't a famous author. The other thing I'll mention is that most of our manuscripts have been entered into our online catalog. But there's one feature of the card catalog that I really, really like, and that's the ability to search by geographic area. So when you're in our card catalog, you have the option to go to our geographic file and search by manuscripts created in a specific location. And I find this really, really helpful when I'm working with researchers, particularly if they're doing local history or family research, because I can go and see, like, oh, well, I know that we have records from a specific time period. Let me go see if I can find the earliest document that was created in this place and go from there and see, what I can find for them. And so for example, looked at our Charlestown records, and we have some early Charlestown town records that are listed in the catalog. And here I can see the specific dates for each volume, and then I can recommend things from there for patrons. So again, maybe you can't find your ancestor's specific name, but if you know they lived in Charlestown from 1658 to 1695, maybe we can check out the Charlestown Town records, and there might be something in there that mentions the last name of your ancestor. So this is also a really good resource, particularly for both focused research and for zooming back out and looking for information about maybe where your ancestors lived. All right, next slide, please. All right, so some tips on using special collections. I'm just going to kind of walk you through the process of how to use special collections, how to come visit us and make reading room appointments. So first off, I always recommend just browse our collections using the discovery tools I mentioned earlier. Take a look in our online catalog, use our digitized card catalog as well. See what you can find. You might be surprised. If you can't find anything, send us an email. We're always happy to take a look and see if we can find something or if we have other suggestions, or if we know, hey, we don't have the information you're looking for, but another library does, and we can give you their contact information. So feel free to send us an email. If you find items that you'd like to see in our reading room, you can make an appointment in our reading room. And this caveat, I'll just say we usually need about a week's notice, and I'll explain why in the next slide. Before I forget, though, I'm going to include the link to create a reading room account in the chat. Let me do that right now, everyone, because I realized I should have put it in this slide and I did not. So this is our link to create a reading room appointment. So if you decide you'd like to visit us, before your visit, we'll ask you to create a reading room account and request an appointment and the specific materials you'd like to see. So you'll log into your reading room account, you'll place requests for specific items, and then you'll submit it to us. Staff from each of the departments, depending on if you request materials from rare books and manuscripts or arts or archives, we will review your requests and let you know whether we can confirm your appointment as is or whether we might need to reschedule your visit. And so when I say we review your requests, this is why the advance notice is so important. As you can imagine, we have some really fragile materials in our collections. We also have materials that, maybe something's been cataloged really well, and that was the document you happened to find online, which is great. But maybe I go take a look at the box and I realize, oh, we have other materials that I think this person might like to see. Maybe there's other stuff that might also be available. And so sometimes, the reason why we ask for additional time is because we need to check first off the condition of the items, but we also want to check and see, is there anything else? Like if this person is coming all the way in here, is there anything else that I can find offhand that I might be able to suggest for them to see? I also need to check and make sure that the items that you requested don't comprise too much material. We typically ask folks we keep to a specific number of items. We've had researchers accidentally request 150 boxes to see all in one day, and that's that's a little too much to get through all in one day, especially if materials are a little bit fragile. So if you put in a request for a lot of material, we'll usually follow up and say like, hey, did you really want to see this many items? Do you want to come in over a couple of days to spend time with the materials? And this just gives us time to have that back and forth with you. We also need to make sure that we have room in our reading room. If you've ever been upstairs to special collections, you'll know that our reading room is kind of small. And sometimes our materials are pretty big. So when we serve architectural plans, for example, those sometimes take up 3 seats. And so that limits how many people I can have in the reading room that day. We also have a giant for example, a giant salter that I bring out sometimes for patrons to see, and that definitely takes up a few giant seats. So I have to leave those seats aside for people, which again limits how many people I can have in the reading room during that time period. So send us an email, place your appointment request in advance, and this just gives us time to do all of those things before you come in to see us. So you've done that part of the process. We've confirmed your appointment. You're here for your visit. When you arrive for your visit, you'll come up to the Special Collections lobby. We'll just complete your registration upon arrival, and we'll just kind of orient you to the space. So we ask folks to leave their belongings in their lockers. You can take in like a laptop and a phone with you. We'll ask you to leave notebooks in your lockers. We have paper and pencils for you to use in the reading room. And this is just so we can make sure that not too much stuff comes into the reading room. We just don't want things to get potentially mixed up with the collection materials. So that's why we have special paper and pencils for you to use. Um, but you're welcome to bring your computer in if you'd like to take notes there. And we also encourage you to take photos. You're welcome to take photos with your phone. We just ask to keep the flash off, just to protect the safety of the items. Um, when you complete the registration process, we'll have you come into the reading room and we'll give you custom handling guidance for each of the items. Part of the registration process is that we'll have you wash your hands before you come into the reading room, and this is because we want you to touch the books. There's really not a lot in our collections that we won't let you touch. Really, the only thing is we won't let you touch are things that are so fragile that like they'll fall apart. And in that case, sometimes we take photos of the items for you, but we want you to touch the materials. Number one, because it's fun. It's fun to touch the items. And number two, you know, you don't have to put on white gloves. We want you to be able to handle the materials and to read them for yourself. So we'll provide custom guidance for each item. So for example, I put an image of like a classic book setup that I might serve you in the reading room. So all of our bound items will be served in cradles like these. And this is just to keep the item well supported. Some people, when they get new books, they like to crack the spines, and we don't want to do that for these books. We want to keep them nicely supported so the covers don't get damaged or anything like that. And we'll give you these fancy snake weights to weigh the pages down. And then you're free to look at the materials. So we encourage folks to, spend as much time as you'd like with the items. We don't want you to feel rushed. We want you to be able to enjoy the items and take notes and take photos as you'd like. So we're really excited to have you in the reading room. So just to wrap up, everyone is welcome to use our special collections. You do not have to be a scholarly researcher. You can just be an everyday person who wants to use materials from our collections. They are here to be used by the public. As you're doing research in special collections, particularly related to family history, don't forget to think like a detective. Be open to searching multiple institutions, multiple departments, excuse me. And don't forget to be focused on that detailed work, but also be able to zoom back out and think about where you can fill in gaps in your knowledge with other existing resources. And finally, evaluate your sources when you can. Try to check them. If you can find multiple different sources for a specific piece of information that you're hoping to find, and compare them when you're able. And don't forget to cite your sources. All right. And here I just have some image citations from the items I used in my slides. And Jesse will come back in and we'll wrap things up.
Here we go. Thank you so much, Claire. I learned some things too. I didn't know you had those cool weights there. Those are pretty
I
interesting.
want some for my home library.
Yeah. So we have plenty of time for questions. So if you have any questions about anything we talked about or genealogy at the BPL or special collections in general, please feel free. Our contact information is up there. Let me see. I think we had a couple questions come in already.
Excellent.
Let's see. All right. Okay. So Karen has asked, many Dorchester records, such as vital and church records, have been digitized or available online. How do I find out other type of Dorchester materials you might have? I have two ancestors of interest. One, Roger Clapp, commander of the fort that's now Castle Island. The other, John Weeks, was quote unquote clerk of writs in the early 1700s. What might I find at the BPL?
Karen, this is a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked this. We have a great collection of Boston Town records here at BPL. Most of the records are for the city of Boston proper, they're pre-1822, but we also have records, for example, for towns like Dorchester that were later annexed to Boston. We have a lot of the records here at BPL. There are also some records over at the City of Boston Archives. So I please send us an email with this information. I'm also happy to look. I'll screenshot this and see what I can find with my own digging. We definitely have some Dorchester Town records from this time period. I will tell you, unfortunately, they are not super well described in our online catalog, but I literally was just staring at them earlier this week on the shelves, so I know that we have some materials that might be useful for you. Again, they might not specifically mention your ancestors. I can't guarantee that, but you're welcome to come in and use our materials and see what you can find. So this is a great example.
Excellent.
Um,
I will also add some of those records were compiled and published in the 19th century, and those are actually up on the
yes.
Internet Archive, that particular volume. It's not obviously very expansive. I think it's just one or two volumes, but that's up there.
Yes, that's a great place to get started with the
Yeah,
Record Commissioner's
yeah,
reports.
yeah. So D is asking, do you have access to documents held by the Mormon Church? So I think I can handle that.
Yes.
There, So there's two different things. So there's familysearch.org, which is a free website. So they have a lot of things on there. They have an ongoing project to digitize a lot of that stuff. So that's just the free open website. There's another aspect of that that is only accessible to affiliate locations. We are not currently an affiliate, however, we are working on it. If there's, trying to things through the lawyers and whatnot. So hopefully we will be able to have that soon. And what that would mean is that there'll be a dedicated workstation here at the central library where you could access those more extended databases. So again, we're working on it. Hopefully it'll be done soon.
That's
So,
fantastic, Jesse. I would love to use that resource.
so would I. All right, so Demetria's asking, does the library have documents from other states or colonies?
We sure do. I will say that we don't necessarily have like town records from like towns outside of Massachusetts, but it depends on what you're looking for. We do have like some printed histories of other towns. So we might not have like newspapers or some of like the town records for towns and states that are not Massachusetts, but happy to help you find what you're looking for. If we don't have it, we're happy to point you somewhere else. So always worth sending us an email.
Yes, this is a very good question. So
Oh, yes.
Vanessa's asking, how do I navigate the library to find the special collections department?
Great question. We're a little tricky to get to. So, the best instructions I can give you, and we do give you instructions if you end up making an appointment, we'll send you detailed instructions as well. But if you're just looking to get up to us, if you come in to the central library, come in through the Boylston Street building, which is the newer side of the building. And once you're in there, you'll see what's called our glass elevator. It's right near Borrower Services and New and Novel. Take that up to floor 3U. It's really the fourth floor, but we call it 3U for some reason. And that's where you'll find special collections. So the elevator will only go up there certain hours just when the department is open. Um, but that's how you get to special collections. And our lobby is open typically Monday through Friday from I think 9:30 to 4:30. So you can always come chat with someone at the desk there, or ask us questions and check out our display as well.
We'll say the little glass elevator, you can only see out of it on the first floor, so don't get your hopes up on that one.
Exactly.
I know Claire and I were just talking about this before we logged on.
We're
Let
lamenting.
me see. So that's, I think, all we have for questions at the moment.
Those
Okay.
were great. Thank you so much.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So I will, oh, let me see. Oh, so Wayne is asking, there is a coroner's report on my ancestor from 1847 in the Elijah Adlow collection. Is there a way to pay for a copy of this to be emailed to me?
Wayne, I have great information for you. We would be happy to provide a scan of this. We can provide limited reference scans for researchers, typically up to 30 minutes a month, up to 4 times a year. So we would be happy to scan this document for you, and we can do it for free. So what I'll say is go ahead and create a reading room account via that link that's in the handout and in the chat, and go ahead and send us an email or submit a request or send us an email, and we'd be happy to send that to you. Might take us a couple weeks to send you the scan, but totally free.
Yes, and that's something you all do a lot up there. I know I've seen some of the requests, so they're
Yes.
a great service. Okay. All right. So let me see. All right, so we'll just start doing our little wrap up now. So this was the final family history lecture for the spring. We're taking the summer off, but we will be back in the fall. So just keep an eye on our genealogy webpage for updates on that. And also, just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, for those who may have missed it, I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone tomorrow. That will include a link to the handout, the slides, as well as a chat transcript. So if you missed anything, you'll be able to catch up that way. This was also recorded, so you'll be able to see it on the BPL's YouTube channel and the genealogy playlist. I will be sending a link once it's ready for people, to everyone who is registered, but you can also just check out that playlist. There's other recordings in there too. There is a link to the genealogy page in the handout as well. It is and I'll just put it in here for you too. bpl.org/genealogy is the homepage. So there'll be a link to that in the email, and I think it's in the handout as well. There are going to be some events on there that are not our programming. There's a genealogy club at Roslindale that's not run by me. That's run by a lovely librarian out at Roslindale, but that'll show up there too. So if that's something that interests you, you'll be able to find information on that. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Claire, for joining us. This was great. Hopefully we'll be able to have you back someday.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me. It was fun to
Yes,
meet you all.
it was great. And thank you everyone for coming. I hope you have a great weekend and a great summer, and we will see you in the fall.
Have a great summer.